It doesn't really matter how close you are to the installation or the doing of construction. Construction is not easy.
It's not. And these days, I do a lot of doing. I think one of the things that people underestimate, mostly about females in the trades, is, again, because we look a certain type of way, and you just nailed it about your guy with the ponytail. I've got these bright red nails, and I wear pearls sometimes. And I always have my hair like in this perfect ponytail or what have you, that I just can't possibly know how to pick up a tool and use it. And the reality is I have an entire drywall crew, and I'm the one who trains them. I used to be a part of a drywall crew. I know how to do drywall, but people wouldn't think that she knows how to tape and float an entire wall because she's the owner of the company. Like, why would she know how to do that? But the reality is that in the construction industry, particularly, or just blue collar in general, people tend to make so many assumptions. And I have learned through just the way that people treat me and the way that people make assumptions about me, not to make assumptions about anybody.
That's right. Make no assumptions, baby. Check every single one of them assumptions you got. Miss Gloria Marie Fuentes is dead on with that thing. I hope you caught her energy the way I did, because the time we spent talking together, we went on and on and on and could have kept on going. And what I appreciated most about her energy is the depth of caring for honoring and serving the men and women that do the work. You're going to hear it. So there's some things that might seem a little over the top, but I know back in the day when I was in the field, and I know for sure now because my knees creak and my back aches, that having a boss and supportive influence like her in my life would have made a big impact. And not only is she like super caring and full of that type of energy that makes you want to be better, she's also got a nice streak of courage within her. She talks about a big career shift that she made not too long ago. And it was a type of career shift that people in her life were like, what are you doing, girl? Like, are you wasting your potential? What, are you crazy? Everything okay? I'm glad that she made the career shift, but you're going to have to listen to the conversation to get them details. And I want to give a shout out to Umut. This is not the first time I've shouted him out. He's a strong L&M family supporter and very active in sharing his thoughts, which is, I, again, appreciate deeply. He participated in one of the monthly challenges that we have with the emotional bungee jumpers. And the challenge was to ask people around you what makes them feel appreciated, which is a pretty heavy question. This was his takeaway. He says, honestly, I was not thinking asking this question would be uncomfortable at first. In fact, I kept avoiding asking it until the last day of the challenge. I wasn't the only one feeling uncomfortable for sure. None of the trade foremen were expecting anything like this from me. Umut, I appreciate you participating in the challenges and sharing your takeaways, and it excites me to see you and the rest of us expanding our self-awareness through some real easy techniques and hanging out once a month. And folks, listeners out there, you are welcome to join. There's a link in the show notes, of course, so hit that bad boy up, do a little bit of research. If you want to have a call with me to get some details, there's a button there somewhere to schedule a call. And here we go to the rest of the conversation with Miss Gloria. What is going on, L&M family? Got a special guest that was referred to us by Miss Plumber Page. And so we're hanging out with Miss Gloria Marie today. How you doing, Miss Gloria?
Hi, how's it going, everybody? I'm doing pretty fantastic. How about you?
Just having fun, falling behind on things, starting things I don't need to be starting, and trying to keep my head up above water. It's a habit I have. So, Gloria, we connected through Miss Plumber Page Knowles, and on Instagram, I think your handle is Glowjoy.
Yeah, that's the name of my brand. I do have a personal page, which is the Gloria Marie, but I mostly these days hang out on my Glowjoy handle, which is the brand that I have created for my business.
Very cool. I love the direct connection to your business. How long ago did you realize that, oh, this social media stuff is going to be or can be important to my business?
This was not my first business. I had tried, I think, like many entrepreneurs who are visionaries, many other businesses prior, and had one or two that were remotely successful, many that were not. One of which did rely very heavily on social media, one being a fitness brand,
Ah,
and the other being, I was a real estate agent. So I did rely very heavily on my social media marketing with listings and networking and things of
sure.
that nature. I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial. I grew up without the internet and with the internet. And I know the power of the internet and had been using
Yeah.
technology in my business long before it was even cool to do so. And everybody thought, oh,
Um,
these crazy millennials, and their stupid apps.
yeah.
And here we are, the crazy millennials with our stupid apps competing with
Mm,
people who've had businesses for 20, 30, 40 years. But when the pandemic hit, I realized that was all we had was
mm,
social media. So I quickly decided to re-engage myself online. I don't think
mm.
I'd ever really disappeared, but I did close all my original pages. Glowjoy was not a brand that I had owned or affiliated with. I was actually known as G Marie and Co. And I just used my personal page to just kind of brand myself. I was hesitant, like most old folks, because I'm part of the old folks now. I put on the oldies station. It's the 90s,
Yeah.
so
I,
I was resistant, but here I am on social media hanging out with 20-year-olds that are into plumbing and all the things. So, yeah, it's a whole different world. What can I say?
totally different world. My favorite part about it is it's boundless. It's
Mhm.
so easy to connect with people. And what I mean by that, regardless of people's stature, maybe, or like place within their organization, it's almost as if they turn that off on social media. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I remember a world where if you weren't a celebrity or you didn't go to a particular, we're listening to a construction podcast, so let's make it relevant. If you didn't go belong to a certain union or
Hmm.
go work for a particular company, or electricians versus plumbers, like what's
Oh,
the
yeah.
better trade? The answer is they're both equally as important and they both make just as much money, right?
Yeah, just
And
plumbers are
so
sexier. That's all. So, elder millennial, which I love that term. You were in real estate.
yeah, I was in real estate. That was one of the businesses I was not good at.
Uh,
Um, so yeah, that was one of the businesses where it had a component of construction. So if it ever did have a component of construction, I was always very good at those deals. But overall,
mm,
I didn't really enjoy it once it was already built or already renovated.
uh,
I actually didn't really care about the deal at that point, which is where we transitioned to construction.
got it. Got it. Okay. And then also fitness. You had a fitness business. So that's an important part of your identity, I'm assuming, part of your life still, or did you just stop the fitness stuff?
No, fitness and health has been a huge part of my life, my entire life. My grandmother passed away at a very young age.
Mm.
I am Afro Latina from the Caribbean. So I grew up on rice and beans and some sort of meat dish or fried something. And that was like our diet. And while my grandfather, who lived much longer, he lived until his 80s
Wow.
and recently passed away, he was very healthy, super vegetarian, was a taxi driver in New York. So I saw two kind of extremes. I saw a super healthy grandfather who sometimes only had potatoes and carrots and fish.
Yep.
And he made sure that he walked every single morning and he would always be talking about being on his fasts. I just saw different worlds and I saw different levels of health of people around me. And I chose one path, whereas other people chose another. I battled with my health, I think, like most women and teens in the 90s, the 80s and 90s. Those were like the Jane Fonda days and the little tiny waist with the spandex and like all the things. Every woman around me was obsessed with having a tiny waist. And so, of course, I was obsessed with having a tiny waist, which led to eating disorders and all sorts of things that were just not healthy. And I think teens in general, in every generation, battle with whatever body dysmorphia. That was just my life in the 90s. And I took it upon myself, I think, once I was a little bit older in my 20s, living in New York on my own and just seeing a lot of successful people around me, waking up early, exercising, and all of these things. I had a couple corporate jobs here and there, and I would just always see all these people and just different habits that, again, I was not used to. So I just started to pick up on some of these habits. Some were good, some weren't. And, the good habits have stuck. The bad habits, luckily, have pretty much all disappeared. And I do believe in being ultra healthy, drinking a lot of water, exercising, and just getting good sleep. I think sleep is so underrated.
Gloria, a couple things. I laughed when you mentioned Jane Fonda because back then I had this workout tape and it was like a VHS tape by Jane Austen. And it was like an abs workout for your core. And man, I would run through that thing like twice every night. I was probably 8th or 9th grade.
And was it like your mom's tape or something?
Yeah, it was my mom's. It was my mom's. I would sneak it. And like, I gotta work out. Where's my tape? I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Mom. I had to like sneak it. And I'm gonna tell you, I had me a 6-pack back then. But
I believe it.
Right, like it was. I was young, first of all, I think, and the time that I had. However, and this leads to the second point, right, of the sleep. Up until maybe this year, I've always had routines and I was always prepared to sacrifice anything to do the other things, whatever those goals were. And the first thing I sacrifice is sleep.
Of course.
I'm just going to get up at 3 tomorrow to get that thing knocked out. Or I'm just going to stay up until I finish this thing, whatever time that is. And I'm currently training for a triathlon, for a little small one. And my body's letting me know that I ain't the Jane Austen age anymore. So I don't recover like I used to. So when I'm putting a heavier load on me, I need to sleep more. So I finally, and I'm probably 3 weeks into it, I have a sleep routine that I designed to facilitate good, deep, meaningful sleep. And even as I'm saying it, it feels, this is the first time I ever told anybody, and now the world's going to know. It feels kind of weird, but think about morning routine. You post something on the socials about a morning routine and it blows up, right? Everybody wants to know what's your morning routine and what's your workout routine. But there's not a lot out there around sleep. And like you said, it's so underrated, but so huge, so huge.
Kudos to you, number one, because I think one of the greatest ways to learn all these things is to train for something like a triathlon. I myself did like some Tough Mudders and also did some natural bodybuilding and other competitive sports where I learned a lot about my body, nutrition, and this sleep, which it wasn't until I did the natural bodybuilding that I learned about sleep and how important sleep and recovery was to my muscle building. I would lift and then not see any results and then find out that all I needed was a nap. And and the next day I could go and do it again, or maybe my body needed a massage or I needed to go sit in a sauna. So I tell the trades in the field now, wear your knee pads. I know it's not cool. And when you start feeling your back and your neck and your shoulders when you're carrying your kids or a bag over your shoulder or something to that effect. You will remember this lady with the pineapple on her head now talking about knee pads and how you should have worn your knee pads for the 4 hours of tiling that you just did.
Yeah, there's a lot. You've seen it. You've been around it. The work is not designed for the human body. Like, it deteriorates the men and women that are out there doing it really quickly. Like, just the work itself. Forget about the underappreciation for mental wellness and sleep and diet. And it's almost, and I love it.
Diet especially.
Right. The roach coach comes by and there ain't nothing but like super delicious, greasy burritos, burgers, fried everything. But it's like this compounding environment that'll tear you apart mentally, physically. And so, yeah, folks out there, L&M family, you don't be too proud. Take care of yourself. Wear the damn knee pads, wear the back brace, actually get some help, get a cushion. We were doing some improvement work, me and a buddy of mine, Sean Moran, here in San Antonio. And it was simple things, watching an electrician, we're studying his work. And it sucked, right? He's bent over and twisted and doing all whatever he had to do. And so we found this cushion. It's like insulation, like a sheet of insulation. It's about a 1/2 inch thick, kind of like Armaflex, but a blanket of it. And so we fashioned that on a little board that he had that he was using to step up and climb. He used it for all kinds of things, climb over and lean on, just put the cushion on it. Hey man, Ruben, try this out. And he's a bunch of sissies. And like, no, just try it. Just try it. And he tried it. And he was like, hey, this is pretty good. And again, it's just a simple little thing. But I think in the trades, we get in this, rather, I'll say it this way. When I was in the trades, I would make fun of people for doing stuff like that. And then when I did it, it was the first thing I was most worried about was being made fun of. What are the guys going to say? What are they going to? And so there's this social element that reinforces torturing oneself. It's a little interesting, but we don't have to be that way. Let's take care of ourselves. Let's take care of each other. That's what we're here for.
When you're a teenager, not to knock on any teenagers listening to this podcast today, because I was one of these dumb teenagers once upon a time, and you don't want to wear your knee pads and your elbow shins or your helmet to go skateboarding or rollerblading or biking or whatever. And I used to be pretty hardcore as a kid. I grew up on an island. We had like 3 or 4 TV channels. It was just better to be outside. And so I didn't want to wear my helmet. It wasn't cool to wear your helmet. It wasn't cool to have elbow pads and shin pads and whatever, even though we were living in Aruba and dealing with like straight up rock. If you fell, like you fell on straight up rock. It's the same thing. It's just not cool. And because the older guys in the trades, and not to knock on anybody that's one of the older guys in the trades listening to this podcast, but in general, the kids, they look up to you. So if you're not doing it, they're not going to do it either.
So Aruba, you came to the States, and I think you're East Coast, is that correct?
Yeah, I live in the East Coast. However, I'm a Texas girl. I graduated from the Woodlands High School. I went to Baylor University. My dad was in oil and gas, which is why I grew up overseas. We were like expats for companies in Houston, Texas. Back in the Caribbean, we call this the mainland. So we moved to the mainland in 2001. It was the year of 9/11. I did go to the Woodlands High School, suburb north of Houston, Texas. I've been in between Texas and New York, actually, most of my life. I was living in Texas when I started this construction business. So, I just happened to be in New York now again.
Amazing. And so now you're in New York, you have your brand Glow Joy, which is connected to your construction business. Tell us about your construction business, please.
My construction business started really as a part-time hobby. I was living in Texas at the time to have a surgery, actually, in 2017. I was familiar with the Texas Medical Center, and my recovery was going to be 9 months to a year.
Ooh,
so the cost of living, as well as just the Texas Medical Center. It's just one of the top tier. People travel from all over the world. So I did my research, and the recovery team that I was going to get to work with was also one of the top tier, working with some of the top athletes from the NCAA right there in Tech T, basketball players, University of Houston, Rice, like all the stuff. And I was like, if they're good enough for them, they're good enough for me. I'm just some like old lady that's like having hip surgery here.
The elder millennial.
So anyway, I go have this surgery, and as somebody who cannot sit still, I was on leave from work, but still working remotely. And the company I was working for at the time was a bank out of London, but in New York. They had an office in Houston. So they let me work out of the office remotely. And I was still bored. I was very far away from my team. So having been homeschooled as a high schooler, I knew that, like my parents, I needed something else to fill that void. I started to study. I got my real estate license in Texas because I already had it in New York. And I started to work with investors. Then I started to invest and start fixing and flipping. And one thing led to another. I learned that most of the contractors there, once they realized that the investors weren't even in Texas, thought they could just get away with stuff. And so I also quickly realized that there was like a need for a protection almost for these investors and this investor money. And so that's where the owner rep business kind of started, where I became liaison between my investor clients and contractors, local contractors or local tradesmen or tradespeople, and just started this consulting service where I just made sure that the projects got done and communication was not lost in translation and just distance, right? Again, it started not like a hobby, but like a side hustle, if you will. Then I very quickly realized that I could make a lot of money just doing this. And I started to focus more attention on this, then took a risk and quit my fancy 6-figure banking job and told them that I was not coming back from my leave. So I stayed in Texas, and some deals worked out. A handful of them did not. I learned a lot from those deals, just working with different contractors and different trades. I'd always been in and around construction sites. My parents and grandparents worked on the supply side of the business. So we're always in and out of construction sites doing estimates and around other trades and having to wait for other trades or materials or equipment or whatever. And then my uncle was a builder. He was a custom home builder, and we'd been around houses that he'd built. And this is for people who have kids and they're in the trades. The kids pay attention to everything. And I learned a lot by just being a fly on the wall and holding a box of screws.
Yeah, I do know. Because there's a proper way to hold things. Like my dad would let me know. He would remind me.
So yeah, I know that I took like a long route to construction, but I grew up around this just blue collar world. My dad had this old blue pickup truck. He worked at the oil refinery. He had this like jumpsuit. So did my grandpa, my uncles, and then they all the installs for the blinds and the window business on the side on weekends at night. My grandma went out and did estimates. She had a little store. Like, you grow up around this, and you also just grow up listening to them talk about all the sacrifices they make to send you to private school and to put a steak on your table and to go to Blockbuster every Friday.
Yes.
And, like...
Blockbuster. Okay, so I love this, and you nailed it a little while ago. The only reason the podcast exists, or maybe the purpose, is to enhance the image of careers in the trades.
Right.
Part of that is helping people understand how diverse and gigantic people's lives are outside of the job that they do.
Totally.
And you're a perfect demonstration of that. My buddy Fernando Cortinas, he's a sheet metal mechanic. He was the model for the podcast. And I don't mean like top shirtless model, like model in terms of persona, because he's an amazing dude. When I look at him, I see slick back hair and a ponytail, beard, the lokes, right? The lowrider glasses, big burly guy. And so it's very easy to think, oh, dumb construction worker. But you get to know him and you find out that he's adopted his child's kids and another family member's kids because of situations they were in. So he sacrificed to go ahead and help raise another generation of people. He's part of an organization that does fan drives and toy drives for an underserved population here in San Antonio. And he does it with a huge heart. I remember I was at like some of the early ones, like 50 bikes. Now they have hundreds of bikes every Christmas to give out to kids, assembling them and the whole thing. But nobody would know that. Like, it's very easy to dismiss them at first glance.
Of course.
So, like, your description of your path is, again, beautiful. And so what people are going to say, wait a minute, you were in finance, 6-figure job, and you came to construction, because it doesn't really matter how close you are to the installation or the doing of construction. Construction is not easy.
It's not. And these days I do a lot of doing. I think one of the things that people underestimate mostly about females in the trades is, again, because we look a certain type of way, and you just nailed it about your guy with the ponytail. I've got these bright red nails and I wear pearls sometimes. And I always have my hair like in this perfect ponytail or what have you, that I just can't possibly know how to pick up a tool and use it. And the reality is, if people listen to other podcasts that I've been on a drywall only podcast. I have an entire drywall crew and I'm the one who trains them. I used to be a part of a drywall crew. I know how to do drywall, but people wouldn't think that she knows how to tape and float an entire wall because she's the owner of the company. Like, why would she know how to do that? But the reality is that in the construction industry, particularly, or just blue collar in general, people tend to make so many assumptions. I have learned through just the way that people treat me and the way that people make assumptions about me, not to make assumptions about anybody. So I don't know who's walking in the door or whose door I'm walking through when I'm going on a job site. And I just treat everybody the exact same way, because the guy who's in some dingy cowboy boots and overalls could own the entire estate that we're standing on that's 96 acres large, right? Yes. And we can't just make an assumption that because he just came from the field from milking his cows and jumped off his tractor that he's not the owner of the estate.
Totally.
And this happens a lot in Texas, right? And so I use that as an example because people also assume, here's this big city girl. What does she know about a ranch life and a tractor and cowboy boots? And I'll tell you, I still got my Stetson and I still got my Ariats. And Ariat is actually my construction boot of choice.
Yes.
Because Ariat makes such good cowboy boots. And I'm not sponsored by Ariat, but y'all, if you want to sponsor me, no shame. Like, I'll take the sponsorship.
Take it,
I'm here for you guys. Texas girl at heart right here. But no, seriously, I wear the Ariat boots because I know they make good cowboy boots. So when I couldn't find good construction boots for women, because that is a struggle for women, and I found out that they made composite toe and work boots, I was like, bring on the Ariat boots.
And the designs that they have, they got some really good looking. And you touched on the choices in terms of construction attire designed for women. And I've noticed recently on LinkedIn, because that's where I spend most of my time in terms of social media, there seems to be more and more, maybe not fast enough, but more and more folks investing in the women's apparel for construction. A friend of mine has Iron Elk, specialized in safety gear, and they have a line of options for female work attire, female PPE, which like it's safety. And I'm a little embarrassed to say, but it's what it is. Like, it never occurred to me that a safety vest is not designed to fit a woman's body. Total blindness. I was having a conversation with someone and it's like a t-shirt. Jess, you ever put on a woman's shirt before? I was like, yeah, I have. I'll tell that story on the fans only page. And it fits different. So that's the thing. Like, for us, it's confining and it's tangling, or it has to be super big. The sizes just aren't available. And so I say all that to, one, props to construction and the folks out there for making those transitions. But at the same time, don't go patting yourself on the back, because we got so much room to cover in order to provide like a welcoming experience for women into construction. And this is the space you're in now. What were your earliest career aspirations? Oh, I gotta leave you hanging. I cannot help it. Come back for the next one in a week. You're going to get to hear her response to the question and learn a lot more about Miss Gloria. And while you're waiting, or maybe after you share this episode with someone, check out the blog at depthbuilder.com. And the blog thing is like at the top. There's a button. Anyhow, what I'm doing is I'm serving up some extra gravy for each of the stories in my second book. And what that means is you're going to get a little bit of behind the scenes, some thought-provoking ideas, and some teasers about each of those stories. And I plan to continue doing that. There's 20 stories. So that means I've got 20 weeks of work, or rather 18 weeks of work ahead of me to keep putting that stuff out there. The book comes out June 23rd. The audiobook is done editing. I'm fixing to upload it into the Omniverse so that we can schedule that out and people can get access to it. I'm grateful to y'all. Thank you for listening. Be cool, and we'll talk at you next time. Peace. Oh my goodness. You're either driving down the road or just so enthralled with this whole podcast that you went all the way down to the very, 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 very end of it. And we appreciate you. We're going to take this as an indication of your dedication. So we got a little special request of you, a call to action, because everybody tells us that you need to have a call to action. So here's the call to action. Be kind to yourself. Go out there and share a smile with someone.